Hello world, welcome to my cooldown reduction nerf commentary. In this video I'm going to talk about how the cooldown reduction nerf affected the free archetypes and the Devastator, with the exception of the Grim because I haven't done that archetype yet. If you don't want to go through the whole thing, here's the quick of it. It really hasn't. Pretty much all the problems that archetypes had before are still the same problems. The cooldown reduction nerf didn't horribly cripple or break any of the archetypes, and most of them don't rely heavily on cooldown powers anyway. The only major exception I would say is the Sigils, which have a base cooldown of 30 seconds, unless you use Mystic Transference, which is a 10-second cooldown on how often you can cast them. Considering how incredibly easy it is to destroy Sigils, that kind of sucks to have a 30-second cooldown. And it makes Mystic Transference look almost mandatory if you want to be able to keep them up. The Inferno. Giant aggro machine because of its damage output. The two powers that have cooldowns that would negatively affect its damage with longer cooldown would be Fire Snake and Imploded. Imploded is an active offense. Having a 45-second cooldown on that was insane, so we're not going to even go over that. Fire Snake. Fire Snake has now a 30-second cooldown, which isn't going to be reduced by a whole lot, but it lasts for 16 seconds. It has a great debuff of 4.2% at rank 1 per stack for elemental damage. And it stacks 5 times, so you have over a 20% debuff. Instead of having Fire Snake up all the time, it's now going to be up every other 15 seconds, basically. That's not going to hurt damage a whole heck of a lot. And frankly, if you're an Inferno, and if you've played an Inferno, you might know that being dead does about 0 DPS, so maybe you won't be dead so much. The Marksman. If you were using a Storm of Arrows rotation, and you did a lazy rotation like mine, which was Explosive Arrow plus Storm of Arrows, you might have to slip in Straight Shot in there. And honestly, I'm pretty sure that's the ideal rotation for more damage. You would do Explosive Arrow with Where's the Kaboom, a tap of that, a tap of Straight Shot for the debuff, and then you would fully maintain Storm of Arrows. So it's slightly longer. Storm of Arrows has a base cooldown of 3 seconds, so it's slightly less spammable. You might have to put in an extra arrow shot. Not really a big deal. Torrent of Arrows has a 5-second cooldown. It was really a tactical use because of the knockback, so that's not really a big deal. 5 seconds isn't very long. Evasive Maneuvers has an 18-second cooldown. That kind of sucks a little bit more because it's an aggro wipe, and having to wait 18 seconds might mean you fall over and die, but you also still have Torrent of Arrows, so you have them both. It just means you have to be a little bit more discriminating on when you use those two powers. Especially Evasive Maneuvers, but not really so much Torrent. And Gas Arrow has a cooldown. Really, Gas Arrow? I mean, come on. That was like only ever good in Divana Hawk's hands in the first place, and why would you take Gas Arrow over Storm of Arrows? So it was never really an amazing power in the first place, but it has a 15-second cooldown, which kind of sucks, but Gas Arrow just needs some help in general, and the cooldown reduction didn't really change that. The Soldier. Does Gatling Gun have a cooldown? No. Can it still do a giant wall of crits? Yes. The Glacier. Ice Burst and Ice Barrier are the only two powers that had a cooldown, and neither one of them is critical for this build. So, well, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. I think I used Ice Barrier for Shatter, and that's pretty much it. And Shatter isn't exactly amazing, so. The Behemoth. Do you like to do Haymaker spam? Because that was not changed. You can still do that, and it's still the most powerful attack that the Behemoth has. Mighty Leap has a 3-second cooldown now. Wow, big deal. Thunderclap has a 6-second cooldown. Not really a big deal either, especially if you didn't use it anyway. You could still go from mob to mob group and Thunderclap to stun everybody, and it's still a great power, so not really affected. It should not affect ability to tank at all. The Unleashed. Force Snap. Well, Force Snap kinda wasn't all that great in the Unleashed before the nerf, so it's now 6 seconds. And you probably won't use it anyway. Bountiful Chi Resurgence. Okay, so once upon a time, it was actually hard to get more than 1 stack of this power. So being able to get 3 stacks so easily with the crazy cooldown reduction was probably never intended. It lasts for 16 seconds and has a 15-second cooldown. Containment Field. Did anyone really pick Containment Field over Force Geyser? I mean, well anyway, it's a 10-second cooldown now, so I guess you need to be a little bit pickier on when you use it. And Force Geyser. Force Geyser with a cooldown is so broken that you could juggle people with it. It has a 3-second cooldown instead of being able to go down to 1.5 seconds. It's still a good power, it just means you can't juggle people with it anymore. Or at least not as badly. The Blade. Thunderbolt Lunge, 3-second cooldown, okay, not a big deal. Smoke Bomb. Smoke Bomb is broken, it never worked in the first place, so the problem with Smoke Bomb isn't that it has a long cooldown, it's the fact that it doesn't actually do anything. The Devastator. Eruption is now 3-second cooldown, it's probably not going to go down any, so instead of doing your cleave combo and then Eruption, maybe you do 2 cleave combos in Eruption. Not really much of a difference. Decimate, its lunge, it has 3-second cooldown. Chances are if you have to lunge so often that it's more than every 3 seconds, it's probably a problem with the content itself hating melee and less of a problem with the lunge. The Vicious Descent, that to me that sucks. It's a 15-second cooldown. It's basically a more powerful lunge, but 15 seconds is kind of crazy. It's not that much damage, and even with the advantage, I mean 7 seconds I thought was a little bit too long, but that would have been fine for me if that was the base cooldown, but it's 15 seconds. However, Vicious Descent is not critical for this build. Not taking it at all doesn't matter. You're not going to magically do a whole lot less damage, so not a big deal. It's just kind of sad. The Radiant. Circle of Radiant Glory now has a 6-second cooldown. And normally you cast a circle and then you never cast it again, so that's not really an issue. Although, that means that if you want to tap move it, it's going to be 6 seconds instead. And I already mentioned sigils that have the 30-second base cooldown or 10% with Mystic Transference. I think that sucks. I mean, sigils are too squishy for that. Binding of Aerotron is 10 seconds, Soul Mesmerism is 10 seconds. I mean, neither of those powers was like super amazing. They're not really critical for the build. It's a healer, it still heals. And Planar Fracture, well, okay, look at Planar Fracture and then look at Unleashed Rage. Do you see the problem with Planar Fracture? It sucks. The cooldown reduction nerf does not make it suck more. It just isn't. It's full of sadness. It was always full of sadness. And it still is. The Mind. I heard several people saying that this was completely crippled by the cooldown reduction nerf, and I went and played it, and my biggest problem with the Mind was that I completely forgot how to play it and kept pushing the wrong button, and instead of attacking an enemy, I kept trying to bubble myself, because I was like, whoops, wrong button, and I did it a lot, so that was my biggest issue. The problems that the Mind has is that it's supposed to be, I'm guessing it's supposed to be the crowd control archetype. Well, crowd control is kind of a mess, so the cooldown reduction nerf didn't change that. Crowd control still needs some help. And then you have the heal tacked on, and frankly, having compassion doesn't even make sense for this archetype, and there it is. So the problem with this was the same problem it always was. I didn't really have a problem playing it outside of not knowing what the heck I was doing, but once I got the hang of it, I pretty much played it the exact same way as I did before. I didn't feel like I needed to change anything. There wasn't really anything that could change anyhow. I could still roll up first before everyone else and drop Ego Storm in everyone's heads. And if we cleared it too fast, then I could just use Ego Sleep on the next mod and mod group. And then on the third mob group, I could go back to Ego Storm. Well, that's not really a big deal. I don't see how that's horribly destroyed. The best thing the Mind could do was single target healing, and none of the healing or bubbles have any kind of cooldown, so you could still spam the crap out of bubbles and you could still heal like crazy, and that did not change. So I don't know how this was horribly destroyed by the cooldown reduction nerf when the Mind already had issues that weren't exactly made worse by it. It has the same issues it always had. the automaton. Okay, none of the main powers are really hurt by this cooldown reduction thing because they don't have cooldowns. Binding Shot has a 10-second cooldown. It's still a powerful click hold. It just means you need to be a little bit more discriminating on when you use it. And 10 seconds isn't that bad anyway. Orbital Cannon. The cooldown for it is now 20 seconds base, and you're not going to change it a whole lot. But, I don't know, the power itself feels a little lacking to me, especially when you look at something like Strafing Run, which is incredibly powerful, and Orbital Cannon just, I don't know, feels like it needs an update. It takes way too long before it actually does stuff, and a lot of times if you're using it on just your regular trash mobs, it's like the mob is dead before it even fires in the first place. So the problems with the Orbital Cannon isn't the long cooldown, it's the large charge up, and how ridiculously long it takes before it actually does anything. Energy Wave, I'm not really sure what to say about Energy Wave. I never really used it very much. It does look really cool, and it's nice if you use the advantage to suck everything to you. 15 seconds might be a little long. I don't think the damage was ever really crazy high or anything. And it would be nice to have a power that's a little bit more spammable that can give enemies close to you that isn't like a chain power. You know, for like a melee tank, you want to suck all the enemies to you while your option is chains and the quicksand or whatever it's called from the Earth set. Energy Wave isn't really going to fulfill that. It never did before. It's definitely not going to now with the 15-second cooldown. So that kind of sucks. It's not critical for the automaton though, especially if you chose Orbital Cannon over it. But it's still, I don't know, I would say it's sad. And the big one that sucks is Implosion Engine. That's a 2-minute cooldown, which really sucks. Especially when you're looking at something like Unleashed Rage can be spammed every 60 seconds, even after the nerf. And it does absolutely insane spikes. And then we have Implosion Engine, which pretty much doesn't really do a whole lot of damage. It's a big repel. What it really does is it sucks all the enemies into one spot so you can AoE bomb the crap out of everything. But now you can only do that once every 2 minutes. It's not exactly something terribly useful on a boss fight like Unleashed Rage would be. It's basically just like a nice clear speed bonus for you, except now that it's kind of sad at doing that. In the end, I don't see how the cooldown reduction nerf really did anything extremely terrible to any of the archetypes. Most of the changes did not affect the core functions of the archetypes. They still do what they are meant to do. The biggest problem with archetypes wasn't the cooldown reduction, it was that they're archetypes in a game that isn't really about the Trinity model, even though archetypes kind of are. And that wasn't made magically more horrible by the cooldown reduction nerf.